Hello, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Modern Mom's Roadmap to Balance podcast and another addition to our Love After Kids series. My name is Kayla Nettleton, and I'm your host. Today, my guest is the incredible Kim Torrence, a somatic therapist who specializes in burnout prevention and recovery. Kim brings a grounded, compassionate, and body-based perspective to her work, helping professional women navigate the weight of overwork, perfectionism, and anxiety. Through a mind-body lens, she supports her clients in building more mindful relationships, managing stress, and creating more peace and ease in their lives. In this episode, Kim and I explore the real-life tension between being a great mom and being a connected partner, and how sometimes it feels like those two roles are in direct competition. We also talk about what balance even means, why it shifts over time, and how we can start reconnecting with parts of ourselves we've pushed aside. There's so much wisdom in here about self compassion, nervous system regulation, and how deepening your relationship with yourself makes space for more connection with the people you love. So, if you've ever felt like you're holding everything together, but somehow still losing parts of yourself in the process, this episode is for you. Now, let's get into it.
Hey, Kim.
Hi, Kayla.
Thank you so much for giving us your time, joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation and
Me
just
too.
to
I
connect.
was really excited.
Yeah.
Yes,
Likewise.
especially after we had a quick chat a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
I've definitely been looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed speaking with you, and we covered a lot of really interesting topics. So I'm looking forward to continuing.
Yes. So before we get into it, I want to ask you a question that I haven't been able to ask because with this new series, Love After Kids, I have two questions that people get to pick. But this one is a new one for the audience. So, in your experience, how can couples find balance between being great parents and great partners?
I really love that question. If it's okay with you to take my time with something so profound, because there's so much heart behind
Absolutely.
that question. And what comes up for me first is like, what is your definition of balance, or what does balance mean to you? That's what comes up for me first. You know, maybe that's even something your listeners can think to themselves. Like, what are we talking about when we ask about balance? I don't know if that's something that you want to think about, or, but I guess when I start to answer a question like this, I think about how we all have a different definition of what that might mean. And that's important when we're talking about being in a relationship, being in a partnership.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the foundation of why I created the Modern Mom's Roadmap to Balance podcast, is to highlight how we do all have different definitions of balance. And
Beautiful.
There is no one right way, but we have to figure out that definition for ourselves. And you are more than welcome to answer that question for yourself of like, for you, Kim, what does balance mean to you? Or what is your own personal definition of balance?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about, the clients that I've worked with and their efforts to be good parents, to be good partners. The first thing that comes to mind is just, there's so much that's going on. Being a parent is all consuming. And that there's this trajectory where when you first become a parent, it kind of takes over your identity. And very understandably, it can take over sort of like the relationship goes into a transformation, because now the two who have come together are now bringing into the world a new being or adding to their family, right? So I think that balance is something that can change in meaning over time. And I think that we might even have different values or even parts of ourselves that come up around what it means to be a good parent, what it means to be a good partner,
Yeah.
Those things can sometimes even be in opposition.
They can.
Right?
Yes.
Because it's very common that you may go into periods of time where like you might have it feel really strong with your partner, and it's like, well, this kid is too. And, I need sleep when I have a moment. And so we may have phases and stages. And I just want to normalize that. I just want to offer that to anybody listening, that question can change over time. And so that's why I kind of wanted to respond first with that. rather than just sort of like, okay, this is what I know and this is what I've seen, which I'm going to get to. But,
Oh, yeah.
I just want to just bring some compassion to how sometimes this question can be hard and it can change. But I think that there's a pathway, right? There's like, how do we know when we're out of balance and what lets us know when we're in balance?
Yeah. I would even say to the audience listening, if you're listening right now, pause this episode if you can.
Yeah.
Grab a pen and paper and journal about what is balance for you. Is there like a definition or is there a feeling? Like for me, it's kind of like contentment and calm and cozy. I know cozy kind of sounds
Not
weird,
to
but when
me,
I'm
it sounds
feeling like,
great.
like I feel like I'm being wrapped in a warm blanket throughout my day. Like that's when I know I'm in a good place for myself.
Yeah.
And so when I think about that and think about, okay, what does that mean for me in my partnership? And then as a parent, what is that going to look like? And that probably looks a little bit different.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. But this is a moment when you could really do some journaling about this. And journaling's not always easy. Some people, like I've been journaling for years, and it's something that sometimes it's like, well, there's not even time, but you can voice memo it. You can just sit with a question while you're driving. Like, what is balance? And I love what you're saying, that I think underneath the idea of achieving balance, there's something that we're looking to feel. We're looking to feel. And I love your description: contentment, calm, cozy. Like that sounds secure. Sounds like safe. Sounds like everything's okay. And that's such an important thing, I think, when we root in that as a starting place for what we're trying to accomplish when we attempt to be the best parent we can be, the best partner we can be. I'm a relational therapist. I've done therapy with parents and children for a really long time. And so I did something called child parent psychotherapy for a long time with children, very young children, 0 to 5, and parents. And one of the things that it's sort of like in the room, it's like there's the parent-child relationship and the child, but like that there's the identity of who you are, right? What's balance for you as a person? We can kind of like hold that it's like being a great parent and being a great partner, and how to find balance within yourself in the things that are important to you. I know that the moms that might be listening to this, they probably also have their own identity as what they do for a living or their friendships. And so, I think that's also part of why it can be such a challenge to feel like that there's this balance, because so much time is consumed in caring and tending for the children, or also remembering to connect with your partner outside of, did you do the dishes or did you pick up the laundry, And those are things that are so important to the functionality of like, okay, we're going to be okay because we didn't forget the milk, and the homework's done, or we didn't to bed on time. So there's just so much. So I just really just want to bring so much compassion for trying to manage all of these relationships, all of these values.
Yeah. And I feel like you first have to think about that for yourself before you can even think about in your partnership and in parenthood.
Oh, yeah. 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 And sometimes you have to build the house while you're running,
Yes.
Sometimes, we can prepare it and sometimes we can't, but we can always find our way back in that, that there's, when you're out of balance, it's also a good place to start. Like, I think it's probably fair to say that everyone, or maybe work very hard not to be out of balance, but it just sometimes happens because especially we're working with a limited 24 hours to a day and demanding jobs and, all of these things that we're talking about, like this value of being a great parent, being a great partner. So it's going to happen that we get out of balance. It just is. And that was something that I was thinking about with this question of like, part of finding our way to balance is like, how do we know we're out of balance, maybe on a physical level?
Yeah.
On a need level, like I haven't felt like I've connected with my partner. I don't feel like we've had a conversation outside of who's going to pick up the kids or whose turn it is to change the diaper. I mean, these are things that are real.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so I think that that's also a question like, what are you noticing coming up for you, whether it be on a physical level, fatigue, but what are the worries also? What are the concerns? I would say this is one of the hardest things that I notice for myself, for clients, that how do we do this therapy model and, internal family systems, which is something I use a lot. How do we cultivate this U-turn, this ability to turn inward? And it's very natural to be completely blended with sometimes our worries, our stress, and to just follow that train of thought. But kind of like with mindfulness, that's the best way I could describe it, is can we turn towards those worries? Maybe even consider that might be a part of you that's holding a job. I'm thinking of someone that I work with who, wants to attend to every need. And when they can't, they feel really bad. When they can't be at the parent-teacher conference or something, or they can't make it to the recital. Oh, that's not going to happen. They're going to do anything to be there for that. But sometimes at their detriment.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of stress and anxiety. And so like, I would say two things are really helpful among many, but be curious enough to turn inward and say, what's here for me? What am I worried is going to happen? What am I concerned if this thing doesn't happen?
Yeah.
And if you stay with that sort of ability to follow that inquiry, wow, you might get some really important information about why sometimes if you're not in balance or you're not feeling like you're doing that thing, why you might be so harsh with yourself. Or we could even think of it, a part of you, the part that wants, we have this idea that there's different parts to our being. Like you might have mom parts, you might have, parts of you that want to relax and go to the movies with your partner or, right? So that is to say, could we cultivate the muscle? It's almost like building a muscle of reflex. Like, can I turn inward and be with this? And then we might be able to see, well, underneath this, worry about, I didn't fill out the permission slip in time or whatever it is that you may be really harsh with yourself. What's underneath that? What's the belief? Is there a burden of belief or concern? I don't know, Kayla, what do you notice? What do you think about?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And part of the things that we'll talk about, and sometimes it's easier for them to kind of think about and wrap their mind around, is like building relationships with those feelings, like with those different parts of yourself. So if you're noticing that you're having a lot of anxiety around something, like start talking to that anxiety like it's a person. That's what I tell them. And I tell them, I'm like, sure, it's just going to sound really funny. But I promise it's going to help. Like think of anxiety as a person.
Yeah.
And like start having conversations with anxiety and see like what's there. And it's going to be weird. And you're going to be like, I don't know about this. But there's so much underneath the anxiety that will come out when we stop and get curious with it. Not in a way where you're like, oh, why are you here? But like, hey, I feel you coming up a lot. Anxiety. Like, what's going on? And you're going to get an answer.
Yeah.
You're going to get an answer. And it might be a picture. It might be like a feeling, another feeling that comes up. It might be a voice in your thoughts or words kind of like come to your mind, but you will get that answer. But it's about building those relationships with those parts of yourself, with those different pieces.
I love that. And it's so true that at first it feels really weird, to just like, to start talking to your feelings like that. So I just have so much compassion. And I love working with clients that are like the cynics. I love them so much because I think I am a little bit too. So I have a lot of compassion for that. But I agree. It is very revelatory because we're basically looking directly at the fear. And if we can bring, and this is a toughie, but like some compassion, it's like, can we listen inwards without frustration? Because frustration, it's not necessarily helpful when it's like, fine, what's wrong? It's like, oh, we might have a part of ourselves that we might not like feeling anxious. I don't like feeling anxious. I'm so pissed that I'm stressed about this. Why am I freaking out about this? Such a common thing I hear from parents, just like burning the candle at both ends, just trying to do their best.
Yeah.
Right. And they're also compelled to do this thing, whether it's saying yes to too many things. That's probably the biggest Achilles heel. Saying yes and signing up for stuff, or just, feeling bad, not having your kids in a lot of extracurricular activities because you think this is what's going to help them be successful. But there it is. Oh, at the core of that is a value. I want them to be successful. I want everyone to be okay. And then it's like, and so what would happen if we stay with the fear or the anxiety, we get to be friends. It's like tend and befriend, that there's actually a good intention, even though, perhaps there's this compulsive signing up for the parent, what is it, the room parent for whatever it is, type of scenario when you're like, why did I do this thing? So we can then begin to have an understanding. There's this opportunity, and I'm going to go for this term, which I love so much, and I think I do so much with my client, is like, there's this opportunity for spiritual reparenting, in a sense, because often those fears are kind of coming from times when there wasn't a sense of security, wasn't a sense of that contentment, that, going back to those beautiful words you spoke to, of like that feeling of a warm blanket, right? So, yeah, I think that is really valuable, like taking an inventory about how we get out of balance. I keep using that example of signing up for too much stuff, but you might have parts that say, no, I don't want to sign up for anything. And so I just want to name, I'm using one example, but this could look very different for different people, and there's no right or wrong, right? But it's just like, what do you notice in terms of these concerns or worries? And I love the way you're saying, like, talk to your anxiety like it was a person, and you can get some really helpful information, and then you might have to do that with the various parts that come up, or if you want to think of it as feelings or worries about being a parent, and then also about being a partner. Right. So sort of like with sort of doing that inventory, you may even think of it in IFS. There's this one nice visualization of like the conference table. So you envision yourself like as the CEO or the person kind of at the head of the table, and every part of you, or if you want to think of it as worries and concerns, get a seat. And everyone gets a chance to speak at the mic, and just go around and you jot down, you listen without giving any advice. That's key. It's all seen and heard, okay, I get, but by the way, I want to say this is not easy. It takes time.
No, it's not.
It's easy for me to say this on a podcast. Practice. I just want your listeners to know that this is a journey, and it's, but I'm just laying it out as something that they can think about, as like this visualization of you as that head of the table. Because we all have this capacity inside to bring patience, perspective. It's like your wisdom self is at the head of the table, your higher self, if you will, or just the part of you that can access patience and calm and curiosity. And you offer that to each part as you go around the table. You hear from them. And that's where I think balance, and this is like all kind of leading back to that, it's like, okay, so once we really can cultivate this relationship inside with our different parent, parts and partner parts, we can begin to negotiate, right? And have compassion. For example, I would say finding time to exercise is quite a source of anxiety for a lot of moms. Like, that I've worked with, like that maybe they don't have that time for themselves. Or maybe you could think of it as the part of you that worries about, am I ever going to be able to get that time from
giving here? What's slipping?
Yeah, worry about that kind of stuff. It's like, okay, so how do we maybe negotiate? Like, I'll just give an example personally. I have a taskmaster part. That's, I think a lot of people have, where I have a hard time putting work down. Like, it's like one more thing. Let me just do one more thing. Right. But then the clock is ticking at the end of the day. Like, I really value and cherish being able to go for a walk after work. It helps me settle things, but the taskmaster part will not let up sometimes. But if I can just sort of like practice that sort of U-turn, like, okay, and it's like, all right, well, and so then you kind of become that like inner negotiator, because then it's the parts of me that love to take a walk are going to be really upset if I don't get it. And then I'm not going to feel good. So, it's sort of, sometimes I think balance is about negotiating between the different priorities that you have and coming up with a solution that is the best you can, do in that moment. And then compassion for letting enough be enough.
Absolutely. And exercise and this connection, like for myself, has really helped me to sleep better at night. I used to have such a hard time sleeping, and it was because all of my anxious parts would come out during that time. It's like, what are you not doing that you're sleeping? But then I wouldn't get any sleep because I'm just like worried about all of these things. And so being able to get connected with that part and get curious and being able to then have a conversation like, you know what? I totally get it. There are a lot of things that we need to do, but we cannot do them right now. Like, we're not in a good place to get those things done. And we are definitely going to get to them tomorrow. But in order for that to be done, we have to get our sleep. And so having that relationship, as weird as that might sound, right? Having that relationship means I get better sleep because my sleep has never been better. I mean, sure, I have a 3-year-old that I'm sleeping in his bed, just trying to transition all of that. So no, I'm not getting like amazing sleep because I'm sharing a twin-sized bed with a toddler right now. But I mean, it's better than kind of like staying up for hours in the middle of the night because I just can't turn my mind off.
That is such a wonderful example. And I felt like as you were talking about how you speak to your anxious parts, I felt that soothing. Like, it was so soothing to hear the way you speak yourself. It was like, oh. And I think that if we can offer that, our parts can quiet, because they'll get louder. They'll get louder if you ignore them.
If we ignore them.
If you just like double down and keep working hard or whatever, it's like there's this relationship that you can build over time of this trust. And so when your anxiety is speaking, you're like, I really see you and hear you, and I actually am totally going to do something about that. But you're right. Like, right now is sleep time. I'm not going to be able to do a good job at that tomorrow if you don't let me rest. And then sometimes we made parts that might need you to like write it down. Everyone's system is going to be different. But it's building trust inside. I see and hear you. I'm not going to ignore you. That can bring some peace, enough to sleep, enough to stop being harsh. This model, IFS, does talk about how parts can get really harsh when they don't feel like you're going to listen. So that's powerful.
And being able to practice this within yourself will only make it so much easier to practice the same compassion and curiosity with your partners and with your kids too.
Beautiful. Then you can go forth with that self-knowledge, and they call it self-leadership. Like, you've listened to your parts, you know what your values are, you know what matters to you. And there's a sense of, then you can go and speak for your parts to your partner. I love this. This is one of the most powerful things I think is such a shift, is this idea of speaking for your parts rather than from your parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you're running the show, not all of the parts within you.
No. Well, and exactly. And then the self of you that has access to compassion, curiosity, wisdom, patience, all that is a better ambassador than the part of you that's pissed that your partner forgot your birthday.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Like, it's not to say that it's not upsetting and you have every right to be angry, but like, if you can listen to yourself and do that spiritual reparenting or that self-soothing or whatever inside, then you're better able to organize what's the most powerful thing. How can I speak for this need? Whether it's that you remember my birthday, or whether it's that we feel like equals in the housework, or whatever being a good partner means for you or for your listener, right? Being able to then go and say, it really matters to me that we have some time where we're relating and we're not talking about the housework and the kids. I miss you. How are you doing? And
What have you been up to?
Right. Yeah. What's new with you?
Yeah.
And I think that's such a challenge. I had one friend talk about how it's almost like she and her husband have their own language. Like, they just have this understanding, and you do. And we're all constantly growing and evolving. And there's something valuable about bringing beginner's mind to this person.
Yes.
You're walking through life with.
Absolutely.
And so, but then also sometimes they may forget you. So going back to this idea of balance in your partnership, I think being able to practice this speaking for your parts or for your needs and making a request. I love that about nonviolent communication. It's like expressing that you have a need and making a request with the understanding that it might not go that great. I mean, they may not be able to meet that need, but at the very least, you're in touch with this need for connection or for fun or for being remembered on your birthday, these kinds of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do like that you mentioned, like, maybe your partner can't meet that need because sometimes they can't. And we have to find that in something else.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, for example, like the fun piece.
Right.
Like maybe they're just not someone who is up for the type of adventures that you're looking for. Yeah. Maybe they're not the outdoorsy person you are, or vice versa. Maybe you're not the outdoorsy person they are. Yeah. And that's okay. It doesn't mean the relationship can't work. It's just y'all have to find that for yourself.
Yeah, that's so important. And it changes. As you said that, I was remembering listening to Trevor Noah speak on a podcast about relationships.
Okay.
And it was so interesting because he talks about being drunk on love, like in the beginning. He's like, his new girlfriend, he's like, sure, I'll go with you to the farmer's market because I'm drunk right now on love. But just so you know, my preference is to stay home all day with the lights out watching football. Right. And so
the funny thing is, it's like, do you in the moment recognize that though? Because I feel like a lot of people don't recognize that. Like he's saying, I'm going to say yes because I'm so drunk on love, but what I prefer is most people are not making that connection in the moment and it's later. It's like, well, yes, I was totally up for that because I was just like so drunk on love. And now I'm more clear-headed and my preference is to stay home with the lights out and watch football all day on a Sunday and Monday and Thursday.
Right. Oh my gosh. Right. That's such a struggle. Well, I mean, he was saying, I think this was a podcast where he's talking about his experience in therapy. So, he is bringing a lot of reflection, but that's the negotiation piece. That's the finding of balance in any partnership. It's like, oh, wow. Okay. So this is okay. So I have a need to go to the farmer's market and see novelty or get organic, and I love it. Yeah. I wish you would be able to join me in this, but okay. All right. But I do think that there's always going to be a negotiation, like finding what you really need and what works. And pragmatism is a great friend.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm glad that we kind of landed it a little bit on this topic because I feel like sometimes couples get so hung up on needing to do everything together and then being afraid to do things separately.
Yeah.
And like speaking of parts, like what is there for you? Like what is coming up for you that you're nervous or afraid to do things on your own? Or maybe it's like, what does this say about your relationship that you are doing things on your own and being able to look at those things and when you can like look at them, maybe write them down, you can then address it. Like, well, no, it's not true. It's not that they don't love me enough. It's just, I really love doing this and they don't. And that's okay. But that doesn't mean I should stop doing that. Like my husband doesn't like to run. I do. So I have like an amazing group of girlfriends that we go run together at least once a month. Hopefully that starts up again because it was too cold for some of them. But we were still hanging out, even if we weren't running, at least once a month. And so like, that's something that I do with them. And then I get to tell my husband all about it and how much I enjoyed it. And we're connecting in that way, but he doesn't actually have to go on the run for him and I to connect in that way.
That's such a powerful process you're describing of like, what comes up at the idea that's in your partnership, the pattern of like doing everything together. What does come up at the idea of doing something on your own? And that can be really good information. I have friends that they're always together and they're like best friends. But, I mean, I think there's something about going out and coming back and being like, guess what I saw today? Guess what I did? Just enough so that you're not sacrificing. I think sometimes in relationships, it's not uncommon that in order to be together, sometimes people do give up this hobby or this thing, or it loses priority. But you can always resume that. You can always find your way back to that. And it can be beneficial, right, to bring novelty or to bring insights from outside.
Because, I mean, because you're still your own person. You still have an identity outside of the partnership. You're still someone else that's not just wife and not just mom. You're also like you. Like, I'm also Kayla. I'm not just mom and wife. I am Kayla. And who is she? And what are those things that she enjoys? And how can I give that to her?
That is so important to remember. And that's such a common thing that might get put to the side, especially when you have very young children, because you're literally like making sure they don't walk out the door or put their finger in the electric socket. You know, it's like this hypervigilance of like keeping this child alive and running after your toddler when your toddler first discovers how to walk. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then... But that is true, that there's the you that was there and has always been there. And that's another part of balance, being able to reclaim that when the timing is right, or in little glimpses here and there, like returning to your love of running.
Yeah, because it's not fair to your marriage, your relationship, for it to be your everything. I think it puts like way too much pressure. And if it can't fulfill your need, what does that mean? Does that mean that it's not working and that it's over? That's a lot. That's scary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot to put on another person. And I think that happens often in relationships, that we may not know that we're doing that because we're human. And in the container of the relationship, some of our needs that haven't gotten met might come up. It's normal that you might notice, like, you know, whatever frustrations or needs and hurts. And that's why this self-inventory, you know, really being honest and gentle. What are my needs? Write them down, you know, and what are things that feel important that I can give to myself when my partner can't? Because you're right, they can't. I'm thinking of one person that, you know, their spouse, when he would come home, would just need to be quiet because he had more of an avoidant attachment and needed a lot of time to kind of regulate himself in isolation. You know, like being alone was regulating for him. But for this person, you know, it felt like an abandonment, or it felt like, why don't you want to spend time with me? And that's a hard one. I'm sure that's pretty common, you know, so like, it doesn't mean that you can't ever get your needs met, but it's like working with your spouses, like their nervous system, understanding their attachment, and then we'll maybe find a way to get that connection in a way that they're able to manage, but maybe it's not right when they get home. And so how do you negotiate that? And there aren't clear-cut answers. These are things that we can come into through conversation and lots of communication, but that kind of communication that's like self-led, after you've done a little bit of tending to your feelings, so that you can then really speak for your needs and hear theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, some of this, you might need extra support. You might actually have to go see a therapist, but just because you might have more of an anxious attachment style and your partner has more of an avoidant attachment style, doesn't mean you're doomed. It's just that there's some work that you each have to do in learning how to regulate your nervous system so that you both feel safe and secure in the partnership. And then you're not being led by those attachment styles anymore.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is hard stuff. Nobody's born with a manual. Like, this is how we're going to navigate, you know, a lot of people don't even understand that attachment styles do have quite a role in difficulties around communicating, you know, conflict. You know, conflict is the challenge.
Absolutely. And if you're wanting some more information on attachment styles and you're like, oh, I do want to learn more about that, definitely take a look at episode 61 and episode 62, where I kind of break them all down. And we'll link that up in the show notes. So if you miss those episodes, you can definitely go back. And I go into each attachment style and how it affects us in adulthood and how it impacts also our relationship and our ability to communicate with our partner. So if that's something you missed, be sure to go listen to those episodes.
Yeah, I listened to that. They were great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I'm an attachment nerd. So
Yeah.
any attachment conversation, I'm all in it.
Yeah. And I really tried to make it as simple as I could so that it was easily digestible and not too long where
Yeah.
you felt like you had to like sit with it for a whole hour. And so like those are definitely like less than 30 minutes, I think. So definitely go listen to that if you have a chance. But I want to thank you so much, Kim.
Oh,
We are like about out of time. And
thank you
it
for
went by
having
so
me. I
fast.
did. We could keep going. I just really enjoyed us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, talking and connecting on these things that are so important. So thank you so much for the
Mhm.
opportunity to come and chat with you.
Of course. And if people are thinking like, oh, Kim, like she sounds so awesome. I want to be like more in her world. I want to maybe work with her. Can you give people a way that they can maybe get into your world, where you're located, and if they're in the same place, how to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so my website is the best way to get in touch with me, kimtorrence.com, and that's with an E, Torrence. So you can send me an email. My information's on the website. I offer individual psychotherapy in the states of Maryland, DC, and Virginia. But I also have groups, and those I can see anybody from anywhere that are really about building these skills that we've talked about. So somatic, how to develop sort of connections with your parts that we've talked about using IFS, and something called somatic experiencing. So kind of how to soothe and self-regulate when, meeting distress or anxiety. And so you can just send me an email if you're interested in that to get on the wait list.
And don't worry if you didn't catch that. We'll link everything up in the show notes so it's easily accessible for you. And again, thank you so much, Kim, for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.